G'day guys and welcome to Primal Waters. Today we're going to go back and have a look at a story I did last year about a sighting of a megalodon shark back in 1918 here in Australia off of Broughton Island, New South Wales. Now, for those of you who are new to this channel may not have heard this story, so what I will do for future videos, I'm going to go over some of the old sighting stories of megalodons to probably update them for the channel as well. But for those of you who have missed this, it's quite an interesting story actually. So in Australia, going back to the 1900s or even before then, there have been sightings of sharks that have been massive in size, and that's reports from fishermen to whalers to even just everyday beach goers. So we're going to go through some of those stories, and this one here we're going to kick it off in a series called Megalodon Sightings. It's a story that was reported back in 1918 by a Australian naturalist, David Stead. This is the actual account sighting that he recorded. It's quite fascinating. Now, once you get into the story, some of the sizes that have been given for how big the shark was, you would kind of think that's impossible. My feeling is that obviously that what they've seen that day is literally scared the life out of them, and I think sizes they've probably oversized the size of this shark. But anyway, we'll have a read of this. I will also link in the description bar down below some stories that you can go and check out for yourself about this. But like I said, this is a quite interesting story, and I'll read it out to you right now. And obviously, clicking on this video, you're interested in megalodon sharks. Now, for my feeling, does the shark still exist? I've said this in the past. I don't think the actual megalodon that existed back was it 2.5 million years ago is the same shark what is out there today. I think it's evolved into something probably a little bit different, smaller, but it's a shark that's probably is a shark that's pretty hard to find. And I think over the years people may have seen this shark, going by some stories that you hear or read about that have happened for 100 years. So, but we'll read this now. In the year of 1918, I recorded the sensation that had been caused among the outside cray fishermen at Port Stephens when for several days they refused to go to sea to their regular fishing grounds in the area of Broughton Island. The men had been at work on the fishing grounds, which lie in deep water, when an enormous shark of almost unbelievable proportion put in an appearance, lifting pot after pot containing many crayfishes, and taking, as the man said, pots, mooring lines and all. These crayfish pots, it should be mentioned, were about 3 feet 6 inches in diameter and frequently contained from 2 to 3 dozen good-sized crayfish, each weighing several pounds. The men agreed that this shark was something the likes of which they had never dreamed of. In company with a local fisheries inspector, I questioned many of the men very, very closely, and they all agree as to the gigantic stature of the beast, but the lengths they gave were on whole observed. I mentioned them, however, as an indication of the state of mind which this unusual giant had thrown them into, and bear in mind that these were men who were used to the sea and all sorts of weather and all sorts of sharks as well. One of the crew said the shark was 300 feet, 90 metres long at least. Others said it was as long as the wharf on which we stood, about 115 feet, which is 35 metres. They affirmed that the water boiled over a large space when the fish went past. They were all familiar with whales, which they have often seen passing at sea, but this was a vast shark. They had seen its terrible head, which was at least as long as the roof on the wharf shed at Nelson Bay. Impossible, of course, but these were Prozac and rather stolid, I don't know, men, not given to fish stories nor even to talk about their catches. Further, they knew that the person they were talking to, myself, had heard all the fish stories years before. One of the things that impressed me was that they all agreed as to the ghostly whitish colour of the vast fish. Local fisheries inspector of the time, Mr. Patton, agreed with me that it must have been something really gigantic to put these experienced men into such a state of fear and panic. So there you go. That's the eyewitness account from Australian naturalist David Stead. Like I said, I will link a couple of these articles about this in the description bar down below. One 1918 Port Stephens shark, was it a megalodon? So it's quite interesting. You probably could turn around and say, was it a whale shark? But like David Stead mentions, that these guys were experienced fishermen, been out at sea for a very long time. They've seen all types of marine animals, and I'm pretty sure they could tell between a whale and a shark. So, but I would have to agree with the sizes of it. It sounds a bit too big. 300 feet long or 115 feet. Between 115 to 300 feet long, that's massive. That's just way too big for a meg. So I'm just thinking that whatever they saw that day probably wasn't that big. It wasn't that size, but it was big enough to scare them. But like I said, there's a few other stories that I will do about what sightings have happened in Australia over the years, and Port Stephens is just one of many accounts of megalodon sightings, if you believe them or not. But I still find these fascinating to read. You can just imagine what the waters were like around Australia back in 1918, or even before Australia was settled. I like to sit down sometimes and just think about, or just imagine what it would have been like before cities, cars, aircraft, boats, and just imagine what the ocean was filled like, the size of the sharks, especially great whites and stuff like that. So, I find that stuff quite interesting, and hopefully you do as well. So, all right, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed that. Drop a comment down below, hit that like button, share this video, subscribe if you're new to this channel. Like I said, I will continue on doing some Meg story videos. Some of those I've done in the past, but I want to just do these ones again for those of you who have missed them as well. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.